Hello, everyone. Hello. I welcome everybody to this very special event. My name is Max Nikias. I'm the President Emeritus of the University of Southern California, and of course a faculty member there. But more importantly, I'm the Chairman of the Advisory Board of the Council for International Relations Greece, which is the co-sponsoring organization of this event. I know that we have many more people, a much bigger audience than the in-person audience attending this lecture online. It's my understanding that we had more than 110 RSVPs of people who wanted to attend this online. And I want to acknowledge everybody and thank them for joining us today. The Council for International Relations Greece is an organization that is specializing in international relations, economics, and politics. And its mission is to conduct in-depth research, propose strategies and new ideas, enabling leaders not only in Greece, but also in the European Union and the Eastern Mediterranean nations, including Israel. And to understand the current realities they are facing with the goal of turning challenges into future opportunities. So I would like to take this opportunity and acknowledge the partnering organizations with us that so graciously agreed to become partners for this event and also advertise this event among their membership. Richard Hirschot, I know, is here with us, the president of the American Jewish community, and I want to thank Rick. I want to thank James Dimitriou, who is here with us, who is the president of the American Hellenic Council. I also would like to acknowledge Rabbi Noah Farkas, who is the president of the Jewish Federation of Greater Los Angeles, and Andy Zamenidis, who is the president of the Hellenic American Leadership Council. And all these are partnering organizations for this event. I also would like to thank Rabbi Uri Hersher for making available the Skirball Cultural Center and this beautiful courtyard available to us to host the lecture. I also would like to acknowledge the presence of Professor Jay Wang, who is the Executive Director of the USC Center for Public Diplomacy. And it was Jay's partnership with the Council for International Relations that actually made this event possible. So without any further ado, Jay, can you please come up here and introduce the speaker?
Hello, everyone. So nice to see you all in person, and greetings to all of you joining us online. Thank you very much, Dr. Nikias, for the kind introduction. I also wanted to add welcome from the USC Center on Public Diplomacy to all of you here and also online and joining us today. And to thank the Skirball Cultural Center for having us and our partners for helping organize this special program. With political and economic realignments underway, the regional order in the Eastern Mediterranean is becoming multi-layered and less rigid. Despite historical similarities among many peoples in the region, divisions and hostilities have characterized relations for decades. This situation, however, has been altered in recent times through expanding cooperation and partnership, including the partnership among Greece, Cyprus, and Israel. These shifting dynamics illustrate an unfolding contemporary international system that exemplifies a world of networks that defies an easy, dichotomous either-or approach. To advance and maintain peace in the region requires the engagement of leaders and the public alike through a robust public diplomacy strategy. Today, we are very pleased to launch the Public Diplomacy in the Eastern Mediterranean program at the USC Center on Public Diplomacy as part of our center's international strategy. The project intends to explore the vital role of public diplomacy in shaping the new regional order, and with a focus on examining and understanding the attitudes and actions of the public in mediating differences and facilitating a stable equilibrium in the region. The initiative will consist of policy-oriented research, training, and a series of events and programming. And I'm pleased to announce the Public Diplomacy in the Eastern Mediterranean Research Fellowship. This program aims to encourage new scholarship on the public diplomacy dimension and implications of the evolving regional relations and to further diplomatic developments in the region. The year-long non-residential fellowship will be awarded to 3 scholars each year pursuing promising research in this area with an emphasis on practical implications in the field. Program details will be published shortly, and we'll start accepting applications on April the 15th. So please visit the center's website and also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. The center will also host public discussions featuring notable scholars, politicians, business leaders, and others to share their perspectives on these emerging trends and to improve our understanding, the public's understanding, of the current activities taking place in the region. These events will both inform our research agenda and increase public awareness of this newfound cooperation and the mechanisms that make it possible. Today's program is part of the Distinguished Speaker Series, and we are extremely glad to have with us today Dr. Aristotle Tziampiris. Aristotle is a professor of international relations at the University of Piraeus and currently president of the Council for International Relations Greece. He has written widely on Greek history, international relations, and energy diplomacy. He has many books, including The New Eastern Mediterranean Transformed, Emerging Issues and New Actors, The New Eastern Mediterranean Theory, Politics, and States in a Volatile Era, The Emergence of Israeli-Greek Corporations, and among other titles. I'd like to invite him to give his presentation, and we'll then open up questions with our audience. For our in-person audience, please step forward when it comes to the Q&A time. We have microphones here for you to have Q&A with our speaker. And for those of us joining us online, please submit your questions and comments through the questions function of the platform. And we will be following very closely your questions and look forward to an engaging discussion with our speaker. So without further ado, please come to this podium.
Thank you for your kind words. It's been 3 long years that I've not been back here in LA, and I'm here back to normal, but it's the new normal, and the new normal is hybrid. So I acknowledge everyone who's online. This is also going to be recorded, so people in the East Med region can view this in the following days. Let me start with some thank yous. First of all, President Emeritus of the University of Southern California, Max Nikias, thank you for your support, which has been instrumental, and not just with everything, but especially with CFIRGR. Jay Wang, thank you so much. The USC Center on Public Diplomacy, and I'll talk a little bit about this, is doing great things, and it's really on the cutting edge on a global level. And when Jay visits Athens, there's already interest from various sources, including the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, for his visit and what they are doing here at CPD. Thank you very much to the CFIRGR, of course, and my colleagues there, the American Jewish Committee of Los Angeles, the Jewish Federation of Greater Los Angeles, the American Hellenic Council of California, and the Hellenic American Leadership Council. Special shout out to my buddy, Andy Zemanides. He's not here, but he will be watching. Let me say, it does take a village. I'm honored and flattered that so many organizations are sponsoring this talk, but let me be very clear. Whatever I say does not necessarily represent the views of anyone I've listed or mentioned. They're personal views. In fact, I have the great luxury to have personal views and be able to express them publicly. So what am I going to do today? The purpose of this lecture, okay, I will explore the historic links between the Jews and the Hellenes, the Greeks, to explain why Hellenic-Israeli cooperation seemingly suddenly took off after 6 decades of detached relations, to present the aspects, but also the limits of this partnership, of this new partnership, with a special emphasis on energy, defense and security, and the trilateral initiatives I will explain. I will argue what the organizations and the people represented here can do to take this partnership to the next level. And finally, I will take out my crystal ball and I will predict the future, especially after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And I will try to do all this in about 30 minutes tops, okay, I promise. There's another promise as well. I'm not going to go all theory on you. In fact, I'll stay away from theory and let's have some fun. Now, I will start by referring to a little local band called the Red Hot Chili Peppers. When I arrived in LA, I turned on the TV and they're getting their star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. And then, because there are cosmic forces at work here, folks, I get to actually see Flea at my hotel having dinner. I'm like, okay, there's something going on here. So this cannot be mere coincidence. So in one of their songs, they extol, from their perspective, the virtues of California. The song is called Californication. Now, I cannot do an Anthony Kiedis impersonation, otherwise I'd be doing another job and better compensation as well. But let me state some of the lyrics because I think they're very pertinent, believe it or not. So here are the lyrics. It is the edge of the world, they're referring to California, LA in particular. It is the edge of the world and all of Western civilization. The sun may rise in the east, at least it settles in this final location. So this got me thinking. Let's think about the West. The West, which is very much in the news, and it's united and has found a new purpose in the past few weeks, ends right here, where we're sitting. This is where the West ends. Where does it begin? I think that the West actually begins in the Eastern Mediterranean. We have a map here, and exactly where Israel, Cyprus, and Greece are located. I think if the sun of the West rises there, it ends here. But that's the beginning. So it's actually very pertinent to, I think, make this connection. Now, there is something to be said about the rather striking commonalities that exist between the Jews and the Greeks, the Hellenes. Both share the same geography and climate and emerge more or less simultaneously on the stage of history. Indeed, they share the common bond of being two of only a handful of peoples who can claim a continuous historical presence of several thousand years. Not that many who have lasted that long. And both share common cultural taste. And here, I usually give this story, which I will, but now it's going to get better. So one of the things that people do not generally know is that modern Greek music is immensely popular in Israel and Jewish communities around the world. And I usually tell the story. I land in Tel Aviv, I get a cab driver, and he's like, well, where did you come from? I said, I flew in from Athens. He goes like, Glikeria, famous Greek singer, is coming. Glikeria is coming. So that's the story I usually use, but I now have a better story. So the woman sitting right next to me, who said, I'm Jewish, started singing in impeccable Greek, a modern Greek song. And in fact, I think she would have done a much better job if you would have been better off hearing her sing than me yak. But there you go. That's common cultural taste. And both share, the Greeks, the Jews, long, dramatic, and often traumatic histories. Here, I need to go even, quote, I have to. I know the CEO of AJC usually uses this quote, and he used it when I gave him an honorary doctorate a few years ago. This is Winston S. Churchill. The Greeks rival the Jews in being the most politically minded race in the world. True. They, the Greeks and the Jews, have survived in spite of all that the world could do against them and all they could do against themselves. Also true. No two cities have counted more with mankind than Athens and Jerusalem. Their messages in religion, philosophy, and art have been the main guiding lights of modern faith and culture. In fact, we can think of Western civilization schematically as being produced by the tension between Athens and Jerusalem. Faith and rationalism has been a productive tension that has propelled forward and continues to do so Western civilization. And let me add, there are not many Greeks, there are not many Jews around, not many. But can we just think for a moment about the immense contributions that the Greeks and the Jews have given to mankind on all sorts of fields? Science, the arts, everything. And not many of us around, not many. So, okay, a lot of commonality, but relations between the modern states of Greece and Israel were detached at best for almost 6 decades, characterized by suspicion, mutual recriminations, and even enmity. Athens was at times staunchly anti-Israeli and consistently pro-Arab, and this lasted for half a century. Eventually, on May 21st, 1990, the then Greek prime minister, who was the father of the current Greek prime minister, officially recognized the state of Israel, a belated but full de jure recognition. Greece, and here I'm not sugarcoating anything because I'm not representing anyone other than myself, was the last to have a Holocaust Remembrance Day, to get the last European then EC state to recognize Israel, the last to get a monument at Auschwitz. You get the pattern, it's last. But I think it was Martin Luther King who said that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. I think I got the quote right. And I think this is exactly what is happening. After 2009, bilateral affairs improved remarkably. And the question is why? Why does it start in 2010? And here I'm going to quote one of my favorite TV series. I don't think it's on Netflix, but you can download it and thank me later. Yes, Minister and Yes, Prime Minister. The amazing BB. And the Mandarin, the British Mandarin, Sir Humphrey Appleby says, never believe anything until it has been officially denied. And if you ask all the officials, they will publicly say, oh, this has nothing to do with Turkey. But I'm not an official, so it has everything to do with Turkey. And in fact, May 31st, we have the Israeli raid on the Mavi Marmara ship, which was was part of the Gaza flotilla, Freedom Flotilla, trying to break the blockade against Gaza by Israel. And 9 Turkish citizens got killed there. Now, why is this important? I can tell you from my research and having talked to the top decision makers in Greece that when they saw the list of the people who were killed, they identified several people who were in our books as Turkish agents. It was considered that this was basically a setup. Very true. But more importantly, it basically meant that Erdogan was lost because Turkish President Erdogan had a choice. Pursue a personal protagonistic role in the Arab world and greater Middle East, or maintain the close, excellent relations that Turkey had with Israel. He chose his ambition. This created a political vacuum in the East Med that was almost immediately filled by Greece, Cyprus, and Israel. Why Cyprus and Israel? What was in it for them? Well, Turkey represents the biggest security threat, and finding partners to assist Cyprus and Greece is hugely important. Both countries were going through economic crisis, and a state that could provide trade, investment, and tourists was seen in a positive light. Both saw opportunities for diaspora cooperation, especially in the US, and both need partners for energy projects on which more next. But how about Israel? Well, let me say, Israel, despite what some anti-Semites think, never has been isolated and is not alone, but is in constant search of friends, allies, and partners. witnessed the recent Abraham Accords. But more importantly, Israel needs space. Israel maybe looms large in the imagination, especially of, again, anti-Semitic people, but it is a very small country, a third the size of the state of Alabama, very small. The Israeli Navy and the Israeli military and the Israeli Air Force need space to conduct their military exercises. This is a crucial parameter that must not only not be underestimated, but it should be highlighted because it goes to the hardcore of Israeli national security. Greece and Cyprus provided this vital space. And also, Cyprus and Greece provided safe, attractive tourist destinations since Turkey was abandoned en masse by Israelis. Plus, Greece and Cyprus are countries where trade and investment opportunities could be pursued. And finally, as I have suggested, there was the issue of energy. The turning point was Netanyahu visiting Greece on August 16th, 2010. May 31st, 2010, maybe Varmara, the first time a few months later that a sitting Israeli prime minister visits Greece. For the Greeks here, we know the best day to visit Greece or Athens is on August 16th. Everyone is on vacation, and that was done on purpose. But I'm not going to go very long, but I'm just going to suggest that Netanyahu comes to Athens, he gets on a Coast Guard ship and visits the very picturesque island of Poros. And that is to underscore, this was highly symbolic, to underscore that this is going to be a partnership that is going to focus on security and tourism. And he talked about energy. So that's a historic visit. All subsequent Greek administrations since then have pursued enhanced cooperation with Israel that has included high-level visits by politicians, parliamentarians, and academics, numerous joint military exercises, I'll talk about that in a bit, effective Greek assistance in combating natural disasters in Israel, which gain a lot of points in the Israeli public, more than 500,000 Israeli tourists visiting Greece annually, 680,000 in 2019 pre-pandemic. These are big numbers. Greek public condemnation and active combating of anti-Semitism, as well as extensive plans for coordination in the field of energy. There was talk when Greeks had a leftist government that this will all end, but that was not the case as yours truly predicted. And as I will now talk about cooperation, get a little bit deeper into this, let me just be very clear about what it's not. It's not about cooperating in wartime. This is just peacetime partnership. Greece, Cyprus, and Israel are pursuing a peacetime cooperation, peacetime partnership. So if the Israeli forces invade Gaza, Greek soldiers are not expected to go there. So let's be very clear about what it's not. I mean, we can celebrate, even saying kumbaya, but whatever, but it's not about that. And the other thing that it's not is, from the very beginning, there was an agreement that Greece will pretty much pursue the EU line, the European Union line on the Palestinian issue, and we agreed to disagree. And that has actually strengthened the partnership because when the leftist administration was in power, and for them the issue is more important than conservative parties in Greece, that was not a problem. It was not a stumbling block in cooperation. Current Greek Prime Minister, just to give you a few examples of what he's doing, on the eve of the anniversary of Kristallnacht, he announced Greece's adoption of the Comprehensive International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance era definition for anti-Semitism. We did that in 2019. This is not only a highly symbolic and long overdue move, but it will further assist the fight against anti-Semitism in Greece, and we can pick that up in discussion. Now, there's cooperation in the military, and I'd like to highlight this. I could do more than a lecture. I can talk hours just listing examples of joint military exercises. Due to a technical glitch, I don't have the photo here, but I want you to imagine it's a photo of F-16s, Israeli F-16s flying over the Acropolis. And I think that is symbolic of how close Israel and Greece have gone on the military side. August 2019, the Mighty Waves military exercise. You have to give it to the military. They come up with the best names. Recently, days ago, Charioteer, Iniojos, 2022. 9 countries, including Israel, and they had simulating airstrikes, evading air defenses, and search and rescue operations. This cooperation is real, it is significant, and it is constant. Now, one of the innovations of Greece's cooperation with Israel and foreign policy in the East Med in general was the establishment of a system of trilateral summit meetings with Cyprus and Israel, but also Cyprus and Egypt. I'll bring Egypt a little bit through the back door here. Although separate processes, it was understood by everyone that they were essentially pursued in parallel, given the obvious political difficulties of having all 4 states and their leaders meet regularly and publicly. The Greek foreign minister seems to be in Cairo every other week. You can see now a recent photograph of the 3 prime ministers of Israel, Greece, and the president of Cyprus giving hands, and this was the 8th trilateral that happened on December 7th, 2021 in Jerusalem. I'll get not theoretical, but a little academic. This system of trilateral summits has several advantages. First, it is supported by Washington, D.C. and Brussels, so it's easy. Second, they provided a useful forum where progress and problems could be discussed. Third, relations started to become slowly institutionalized, thus creating conditions that promote cooperation. Fourth, regular summits create opportunities for leaders to get to know each other. And there was a love fest between Netanyahu and the former Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras, and they have nothing in common, except they actually hit it off. I have a theory, we can pick it up in Q&A, but it's true. And also, here's something very interesting. We all have heard of the clash of civilizations theory, Huntington, but here we have a predominantly Christian Orthodox, a predominantly Jewish, and a predominantly Sunni Muslim states cooperating. And here I could go into theory, but I will spare you. The tripartite Israeli, Greek, and Cypriot summit treaty was transformed on 20th March 2019, when the then leaders were joined by U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo in Jerusalem, inaugurating the 3+1 process. So now this is bringing the U.S. in, and this is especially important for Cyprus because Cyprus is not and cannot become a member of NATO because of Turkey, but Cyprus is now cooperating with the U.S. And in fact, Victoria Nuland, the Undersecretary of State, is about to go to Cyprus to inaugurate the Cyclops Center, another great name, whose leader is actually one of my students at my American Studies graduate program. So we have 3+1, we have summitry, we have energy, we have tourism. This is real. This is not people saying, okay, let's do something. This is actually happening. Now, let me say something here. Let me digress just a little bit. And let me say 2 things about East Med. We can go back to the map of the East Med. And, it's a new region. It's in my books. And you might say, seriously, Dr. Tziampiris, it's a new region. Geography doesn't change. This has been there for millions of years. So, of course, geographically or geologically speaking, yeah, it hasn't changed, fair enough. But regions are also, to an extent, social constructs. Witness a debate of how to call the Middle East, or the fact that we cannot decide to this day what countries are part of the Middle East. This is an ongoing and will never be resolved. So 15 years ago, there were few books, conferences, or public lectures about the East Med. This has now dramatically changed. Why? I'm reminded of a former British Prime Minister, Harold Macmillan. So he was talking to a gentleman and a journalist, and I think the question is like, you were so popular and now you're not doing that well, what happened, what's the reason? To which he, in a very British manner, replied, events, my dear chap, events. So the East Med now is a new region because of events that have included the civil war in Syria, waves of refugees, renewed great power competition, the rise and thankfully fall of ISIS, but also energy. And now I turn to energy, which is the big kahuna, the big elephant in the room, but I am going to address it. In 2010, the U.S. Geological Survey estimated that the East Med has close to 122 trillion cubic feet of natural oil and more than 1,689 million, so that's billion, barrels of oil. Let me give you a few examples. Actually, let me quote an Israeli prime minister. I love this quote. So it's a joke in Israel that's been going on forever. So she said, Moses took us 40 years through the desert in order to bring us to the one spot in the Middle East that has no oil. Perhaps true, but it has billions of cubic feet of natural gas. Let me give you probable reserve estimates for just a few of the fields. Zoar in Egypt, 845 BCM, billion cubic meters. Leviathan in Israel, 622 BCM, and it is producing. Aphrodite in Cyprus, 127 BCM, pursuing sales. Calypso 1 in Cyprus, between 170 and 227. Glaucus 1, 192 to 227. Tamar in Israel, 280, and it is producing. And there are more, many, many more. There's energy. So, okay, we know that that's there, so what do you do? So let me make a few points. Energy infrastructure projects are long-term endeavors. They typically take 8 to 10 years, and they're fundamentally dynamic in nature. They're affected by politics and have financial, technological, and environmental dimensions. Now, one often hears the expression, pipelines for peace, implying that you build a pipeline and its existence will act as an incentive to produce or maintain peace. However, both academic research and common sense suggest conclusively that the exact opposite is the case. You need first to have peace and positive political relations, then you can talk pipelines. This is why there's no US firm right now talking about a pipeline in Iran, or why there's never going to be an Israeli pipeline going through occupied Cyprus, northern Cyprus. There are several energy projects underway in the region. Let me highlight two. The Eurasia Interconnector, 2,000 megawatt, 750-mile underwater electricity cable that will link the power grids of Israel, Greece, and Cyprus, and is financed largely by the EU, has already earmarked 657 million euros. That's $736 million. I have written down. Labeling a European project of common interest. And then there's the East Med pipeline. 6.8 billion USD, 1,180-mile undersea pipeline that could carry up to 20 billion cubic meters of gas from Israel to Cyprus, to Crete, to the Greek mainland, and then to Italy, covering potentially up to 10% of Europe's natural gas needs. In January, and it was clumsily handled, the US sent a non-paper saying we do not support this politically. And why? First of all, it was the official reason was that it was commercially non-viable. That may indeed be the case. But the second reason had to do that Turkey's not a part, and it was seen correctly as a way of being nicer to Turkey and making sure we don't lose Turkey. That's, of course, pre-Ukraine. So I'm reminded here of a story, true story by Samuel Clemens, better known as Mark Twain. And a U.S. newspaper wrote his obituary and said, unfortunately he was traveling and he died. To which he cabled, he would have tweeted today, but he cabled back in the day, reports of my early demise are greatly exaggerated. So one wonders if reports of the East Med's pipeline demise are greatly exaggerated. Today, the foreign ministers of Greece, Israel, and Cyprus met in Athens and promised further cooperation on the energy field. I could have put up a similar photo they did with the prime ministers. It was the foreign ministers today. So personally, if you ask me, I think more likely is to get a cable pipeline going to Israel and having, to Egypt, and having their, making use of Egypt's LNG facilities. But I don't know. Let's see. Okay, I should go. I'm almost done, by the way. I'm getting there. So just a couple more points, and I'll skip some we can have in discussion. But let me say, there's a very interesting project called the East Med Gas Forum. And the East Med Gas Forum is an organization. It's an Egyptian initiative. It is based in Cairo, the headquarters. It includes members such as Egypt, Cyprus, France, Italy, Jordan, Israel, and the Palestinian Authority. How many such cases do we have? And then the Palestinian Authority vetoed UAE after the Abraham Accords. Okay, not so smart. As I said, there are a lot of infrastructure activity, energy-related, in the East Med. The list is very long. Eurasia Interconnector, Euro-Africa Interconnector, Greece-Bulgaria interconnectors, all sorts of things. I can go on and on. So here's the thing. I don't know which ones are eventually going to be built. Some will. But this is what I do know. Absent the remarkable improvement in political relations between Greece, Israel, and Cyprus, we would never be even having this discussion. So now, let me take out my crystal ball. Predictions time. And I will make some predictions, but with two caveats, okay? First of all, let me quote my favorite philosopher, Yankees catcher Yogi Berra. And in fact, I should be at the Yankees home opener on Thursday, fingers crossed. I'm telling you, cosmic forces are at work. So Yogi Berra said, it's hard to make predictions, especially about the future. And let me, it's true. And let me also quote a famous and very renowned British historian, 20th century historian, A.J.P. Taylor. And he was asked for predictions, and in exasperation, he said, well, you know what? It's hard enough to predict the past. He's got a point. So, okay, here's the question that I get asked, and in fact, I'm just gonna go straight through it. Will the improvement or an improvement in Israeli-Turkish relations destroy this partnership that I've been talking about? That's really the big question. President Herzog of Israel recently visited Turkey. Symbolically, and importantly, he first visited Athens. So, crystal ball is out, and the answer to the question is no. It's not going to affect, even if it happens. Why? A lot of the partnership has already been institutionalized in the fields of security, in the fields of the military, the trilateral, the 3+1. This is now institutionalized. That's not going away. In fact, since 2010, I've been saying institutionalize as much as possible, as fast as possible, not that they needed to listen to me. Turkey is not easily going to be trusted, fully trusted by Israel, especially while Erdogan is in power. And on the energy front, few wanted to replace a dependency on Russia with a sub-dependency on Turkey. Let me also say that trade relations between Israel and Turkey, unlike political relations, never soured, and there are common interests in Syria and Iran. Normalization of relations is nothing really breathtaking or earth-shattering unless you take into account the abysmal relations for over a decade between the two countries. And a final point. With a war in Ukraine, the United States is pushing for, and it makes total sense, to lower tensions, avoid provocative acts, and eschew a revisionist agenda in the East Med. I've been talking for close to 15 years with top Greek decision makers, and they will tell you in person, you know what? Lower tensions in the East Med is actually good for Greece. It's commonsensical. You don't want to have war. You don't want to have a revisionist agenda by Turkey. So I think that the prognosis, regardless of what happens with Turkey, which is not going to be that much, is positive because we have now other priorities and other things are going to in the world. But there are two other reasons why I'm making, let me just drink some water. Why I'm making this prediction. And it has to do with you guys being here. First, public diplomacy is a potent force for good and for producing fewer tensions in the East Med. Public diplomacy is like a magic bullet. And what we're going to be doing and what we're starting is going to contribute to stability and to this partnership in the East Med. And then there are the organizations like AJC Hawken, represented here, have made a huge contribution in Congress. The East Med Security and Energy Partnership Act of 2019. Bipartisan. How many things are bipartisan in Washington nowadays? This ended the arms embargo on Cyprus and facilitates energy cooperation. Senators Menendez and Rubio are now introducing another act, the U.S.-Greece Defense and Interparliamentary Act, which is again going to help energy security cooperation. Because of what centers like USC's Center on Public Diplomacy and diaspora groups hosting this public lecture are doing in the US, the Hellenic-Israeli partnership is poised to have a bright future at a time of global turbulence and uncertainty. And I'm really proud to have been a small part in these efforts. Thank you very much.
Let me thank you so much, Dr. Tziampiris. So now it's for questions for in-person audience. We have 2 mics. Please step forward and to ask questions. And for our online audience, please send your questions through the question function. We already have quite a few questions from online. And so I will be sharing these questions with you.
Q&A is always the best part.
And we can go to the first question with the online questions.
Okay.
Okay. Can Dr. Tziampiris speak
Just
to
Ari.
other countries who may be good partners in this scenario?
Very good question. So I already mentioned Egypt, but I think that the idea is to go broader, and we are also seeing a lot of cooperation with United Arab Emirates, with Saudi Arabia. I know that eventually the idea is to maybe even get India, which is ambitious, but people, again, at the highest level are talking about it. And through these energy projects, Italy comes in as well, and we'll probably see more Bulgaria through the Greek-Bulgaria interconnector and other energy projects. So this is a very good observation and question. It's not just about Greece, Cyprus, and Israel. These projects will have more partners, and perhaps the most important, who already is part of it, is the United States of America. Okay. Sure.
Professor Tziampiris, as you correctly pointed out, President Herzog of Israel actually visited Cyprus, visited Athens, and then he paid a visit to Turkey. But the Prime Minister of Greece followed with a visit to Turkey, I believe a few weeks later.
Yes.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So,
And what your sources tell you about
yes.
the visit?
Okay, sure. I'm glad to reveal all. This is actually part of lowering tensions in the East Med on the eve of Ukraine's invasion by Russia. So the fact that the Greek Prime Minister went to Turkey, and I think he's going to go back, is important. And also there was, I wouldn't say a love fest, but it was palpable that there is an effort to lower tensions and to have a more normal relationship. Remember, 2 summers ago, Greece was essentially threatened seriously and militarily by Turkey. So, and I lived through this, and so this is, I think, not a coincidence. Without any doubt, there's substantial pressure emanating from the United States, and it has to do with Ukraine. It's linked to Ukraine. And again, it's commonsensical. You can't have Greece and Turkey, or Turkey really creating all sorts of problems in the East Med at a time when the West is focusing on its energy dependence on Russia and on what is happening, the terrible things and atrocities in Ukraine. So I think it's not a coincidence, and it's connected to real events, global events, and it's connected to DC here. Could you please come over here? Yeah.
Hey everyone. Doctor, I have a question about the environmental impact of natural gas going through the East Mediterranean, and the effect of natural gas and how that will affect the dependency on oil.
That's an excellent question. So we might be saying, yeah, go natural gas, but in reality, it is seen as as transitory, like a transition to more green energy. However, I'm afraid from an environmental point, all these now new projects that might be built or created might have as a side effect longer use of natural gas. So I think that's a real concern, and it's actually something that we should highlight. I've taught courses. I directed an energy program on energy, and one of the things that we focus is the environmental impact. So I'm doing more politics here, but that should be part of what we're doing. The European Union now is really trying to have a green agenda, is really ambitious with a target date of 2050, probably over-ambitious, but I'll tell you what, it's better to have good targets than have no targets. But thank you for highlighting this. It is an important, or should be an important part of all discussions. And it has a little bit been lost in the scramble to make up for Russian energy. So thank you for pointing that out. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Professor, for excellent talk, really.
You're welcome.
Meshkati, I'm a professor at USC, professor of engineering. I developed a course over there called Engineering Diplomacy under the guidance of Dr. Max Nikias. As you know better than me, on the Eastern Mediterranean, there is also another event happening which is very important for geopolitics of energy. And that's the construction of 4 nuclear reactors by Russia in Akoya, in Mersin. I have 2 related questions, because Mersin, as you see, is very close to Cyprus. And since I have visited both Fukushima and Chernobyl, and I learned, and that's what I look like this, and I wait until the night comes, I glow at night. I learned really we need to think about unthinkable. What is the position of Israel, Cyprus, and Greece vis-a-vis the construction of these 4 nuclear reactors? And then the second question, what's the impact of the embargo or the sanction of the Russian gas on the Trans-Antalya pipeline?
The TAP, on TAP, yes.
TAP and TAP.
Yes, so TAP is actually, let me start with the second, and the first, I have to think a little bit more about it, but the second part is that TAP is now even more important. The part of TAP that goes through Greece is pretty much done, and I think it was a very good, it now seems a very good idea to have that pipeline. And again, it took 10 years from someone thinking it to actually being done, about 10 or 11 years. The second issue is that I have seen statements, and I think it should be, the position should be one of concern. And in fact, I'm going to take advantage of what you just said, and I'm going to relate back in Athens that this should now be an even more important talking point, not just a talking point, it should be part of the discussion, because it is extremely important. And we saw what happened in Ukraine, a fight.
Zaporizhzhia.
Yes. So it's not that I have an answer, it's that I'm going to steal your observation and try and
Talk to Dr. Nikias. He's
Yes.
the man that inspired me.
So thank you very much for that.
We have a few questions.
Sure.
I'm just sharing this with you. Let me see this. Okay. Besides cultural and energy sectors, are there innovative collaborations that were surprising in the region? And there's a similar question. What do you think each country has learned from one another that was surprising or unexpected during this partnership?
Okay. First of all, let me say that the cooperation between all these states is not, it also has an aspect that focuses on innovation. Israel is often referred to as a startup nation, correctly, in my view. And I think that a lot of both Greek companies and the Greek government, and I think same stands for Cyprus, want to take advantage of Israeli innovation, be it in startup companies or, for example, desalination plants. So I think that this is very coveted, and I think it's an important part. I think that, so the other question, oh boy, it's a, this, what have we learned? Well, one thing from a Greek perspective, I'm not going to answer this for the Israeli perspective. I think that on average, Greeks didn't know much about Israel, including politicians. They didn't travel to Israel. The former Greek prime minister got to travel to Israel for the first time when he became prime minister. So I think that one of the most interesting aspects is that with hundreds of thousands of Israelis visiting Greece every year, average Greeks have come into contact with Israelis and now have a better understanding of what Israeli citizens think and stand for. So I think that is, I wouldn't say what happens with Israel. From a Greek perspective, I think the great thing is that average Greeks get to come into contact with average Israelis. And that is immensely important. It's not just elites or politicians or academics. We're talking about the people. And that is actually probably more important in the long run.
Thanks for the talk, by the way. So a lot of what you mentioned is at the state level. We saw pictures of the foreign ministers together. Yes. I'm wondering if there is any cooperation that is highlighted or celebrated at the local level, maybe between cities in these regions, right? Because research-based, again, collaboration, cooperation will happen ultimately at the local level, and if that is organically pursued, then perhaps it's more long-term.
Another great question, and I'm glad to report that this has transpired. Let me offer a few examples. My hometown, where I was born and raised, of Thessaloniki, which has a very important part in Jewish history, has played a very important part, had a thriving Jewish community until March 1943. There have been, at the local level, especially by the former mayor, but it has continued, to bring Israelis, see where people who have their heritage there, bring city diplomacy is what it's called actually. So this has happened also with the city of Volos in Greece. So these are two examples. But you're absolutely right. Again, I can't do everything in too little time, but let me put it this way, that a lot is happening in academia. And universities do not need the politicians or the prime minister to tell us, have a course, invite speakers, give scholarships. The Israelis are giving far more scholarships than we are, but it's happening. I have former students of mine who are now pursuing graduate studies in Israel. This was not the case even a few years ago, with full scholarships. So at the academic level, so much is happening, and actually so much more can happen with very little money compared to US standards. Then on culture, all the concerts, all these things that are happening. There have been, visits have been organized for journalists and parliamentarians, by the way, which is, again, you're not obligated to know, but it's much different once you come to Greece, you come to Israel, you meet people, you have a local understanding and better appreciation of what is going on. So, in effect, now I'm thinking about what you said, what happened was the politicians created the framework, the positive framework, which can now be filled in by academics, by people in the arts, by business people, and by energy companies as well. But having that framework is absolutely necessary. Without that, it's just not good. Nothing would have transpired, or very little.
If I may just kind of inform, LA actually has a very rich history of Greek Jews coming to LA.
Oh.
On MLK Boulevard in South LA, there's actually a number of synagogues that were established in the 30s, 40s, and 50s by Greek Jews who left Greece. There is actually every year a annual convention, Catalina, of Greek Jews that live here now. So there's actually a whole history and connection.
Thank you. I did not know that, and I'm very happy to hear about it. And I'm actually going to research the convention. I don't know if there's a website or material, but it sounds fascinating, and I'm really happy to hear this. I'm not necessarily surprised, but I'm very happy to hear this. Thank you for sharing.
Before I raise the next question, I also want to acknowledge Barry and Nancy Sanders for any audience. Barry is chair of the advisory board of the Center on Public Diplomacy. Thanks for joining me. Thank you. Yes. The next question is, how dependent is the region on Russian oil? And is the energy diplomacy that you are talking about in the region offering any new models of energy diplomacy, or what's happening there is like what we have seen in the past in countries' relations through their energy exchange.
Okay, so this is, I need to go a little academic here, but not too much. Well, when it comes to, we usually use the word dependence, but there are two ways that you can have an energy relationship. You can be energy dependent or energy interdependent. Being interdependent is not necessarily bad, it's probably good. Being dependent is not good. And it has to do with how much energy you import. So let's say 90 or 100% of your energy comes from one source, that's dependence, that's bad. 20, 30%, that's interdependent, that's okay, okay-ish. The region is more interdependent than dependent on Russian energy. And I can speak for Greece, the past few years, the energy relationship with Russia has been decreasing in terms of percentage. And Greece is now, as is Israel, in terms of percentage, one of the top 10 countries in the world, top 10 markets for US LNG, both Greece and Israel. So Greece is now importing more and more American LNG, and my crystal ball prediction says it's going to increase substantially. So the region, Egypt is not dependent at all. But the region is more interdependent than dependent, and I think in the case of Greece, is moving more towards substituting as much possible from Russian energy with basically American LNG. And there's the port of Alexandroupolis in northern Greece. You can look it up. It's one of the most interesting, fascinating places in the region. The port is going to be privatized. There's an FSRU facility being built, and there's going to be a U.S. military base built there as well, and it's going to be a gateway for, I think, American LNG and American forces into Europe. It became far more important with what happened, with what is transpiring right now in Ukraine. Let me just say something else. Greece is a laggard when it comes to energy. The Greek Prime Minister is about to announce a roadmap with the goal for some drilling to start in 2025. So in terms of exploring and taking advantage of its own energy resources, Greece lags behind Cyprus, Israel, and Egypt. Just a fact. And in fact, the roadmap should be announced any day now.
We have a question on science diplomacy.
Okay.
We know that science exchanges, like the Jefferson Fellowship, has been instrumental to advances in the field. Do you think these pending agreements will fund more science exchanges?
It better. I think the answer is yes. But a lot depends on private citizens and foundations. So you cannot and should not expect everything from the government of Greece, Israel, and Cyprus. Again, create the framework. And I think that what we're doing right here, what Jay Wong just did, announcing 3 new fellows, these are the kind of activities that bring research, bring minds, unite people, and I think that is a fascinating and very, very important aspect. You just cannot leave it all or expect everything to come from politicians. This is exactly the area, science diplomacy, scholarships, fellowships, where a lot can be done, and they have a multiplier effect. A substantial multiplier effect. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much for your remarks. What is the impact, if any, of Turkish-occupied Cyprus on the triumvirate of nations that you're talking about?
Well, thank you. Let me just say here that we're talking now, and the world is frustrated and condemning the occupation of a good chunk of eastern Ukraine by Russia, and correctly so in my view. I just wish the same attitude was evinced when it comes to occupied Cyprus, which has been occupied militarily since 1974. Since 1974. What is happening in Ukraine has happened, did happen in Cyprus in 1974. So this is, in terms of all these relationships, it's an important factor. You cannot have give you 3 examples. I can give you, but 3. You really cannot have full normalizations of relations unless you resolve this issue. 2, on energy, you can have, for example, pipeline projects going through occupied, unrecognized northern Cyprus. So it has an effect on what can be thought or be actually pursued. And the third is, Turkey's blocking all sorts of things for Cyprus, which is why I highlighted that 3+1 is important, because Cyprus, because of Turkey and the occupation, cannot get into NATO, but the US can get close through these processes with Cyprus. So this is an important factor, and thank you. And let me say one more time again, this is important. We all are thinking of Ukraine. Yes, it is an abomination what is happening right now in Bucha and all these places. But let's not forget the ongoing occupation of northern Cyprus since 1974. And in my mind, there's no real difference in terms of how this stands in terms of history, morality, and international law.
What does public and private partnership like in this particular situation in the region?
Public and private. Okay, so again, this is my basic point. The public partnerships create frameworks, provide incentives, provide reassurance. Let me give you, I skipped it to save time, but a lot of the discussions about the region, you will hear exclusive economic zones, EEZs. And this is an important part of what is transpiring in the Eastern Mediterranean. There have been people like Professor Kariotis, Professor Mazis, a few colleagues who have been talking about this for decades. And states are trying to delineate their EEZs. Greece did a partial delineation with Egypt. Cyprus and Israel have done one. They're competing ones. Turkey has done one with Libya. Why is this suddenly so important? This is the public aspect. Because if you're a private company and you want to invest billions of dollars, you want to know, okay, who owns this? What is the situation? It's like buying a plot of land or an apartment. You want to know where it extends, who has the ownership, to whom it belongs to before you go buy it. Same thing with companies. So this is why the concept has become very important. And it's an example how the public sector provides the reassurance and the framework for the private companies in this case to come in and potentially invest billions. Interestingly enough, Greece and Cyprus have not done a delimitation of their EEZs. But this is a very important aspect not to be underestimated. So the partnership is, I think, the public sector creates the framework, the reassurance, provides incentives, and then civil society and corporations as well can come in and provide, do a lot of good and provide and contribute to stability and to this partnership.
A question about how does the great power rivalry impact in the region?
Very good question. So right now, we have witnessed the reemergence of great power competition in the Eastern Mediterranean. We have a renewed Russian presence in Syria. Russia has been the key actor in basically winning the civil war for the Assad regime. Russia has been rewarded by not only being a more important actor and reaping diplomatic rewards, but benefits, but also by having new bases and having a new military presence in the Eastern Mediterranean. The Chinese are investing in the region. They now control the port of Piraeus, Greece's largest port, or my university, and historic port of Athens. 2 ports in Israel, in Haifa and Ashkenaz. And so the Chinese are having more of a different, not so much military presence, but part of their strategic thinking. The U.S., I think, to some extent, never left the region. That's not true. But let's say it was seen as being less interested, and I think that void was filled by Russia, China, to an extent Turkey. The U.S. is back with a vengeance.
We have time for a couple more questions, and here we have a question about what do the students who go on these educational opportunities in the region, how do they share their thinking and has shifted after being there? Sorry.
Yeah.
But it's about students,
yes,
young
yes,
people's
yes.
thinking.
Okay, so this is very interesting, and I have to say that, and maybe not for the audience here, but maybe for a wider audience, that if you go to a place like Greece and especially Israel, and you're expecting to hear one opinion, no, it's the wrong place. So students who go there hear a multiplicity of views, theories, opinions. So this is not an exercise in propaganda. What they do come up with is a much better appreciation of the complexities, the issues, and the dangers faced by Israel. And I think that's very important. And really, I can say this having studied and been visiting, having done quite a few sabbaticals in the U.S., unless you live in a country, you're not going to get, you travel for a week, okay, a month, maybe, but you really have to live in a country to start understanding and appreciating life and what it means. And I think this is what the students are getting out of it. I think what the students are getting out of it is a better understanding. Let me stress, though, it's not a propaganda exercise. No one tells me no one told me what to say today. No one tell this to the Greek students or that. In fact, as I expected, they get 100 different views, which is good. It's excellent. Frustrating, but excellent.
So here we have the last question. So public diplomacy always starts with public attitudes, public perceptions towards countries and what have you. Can you say a little bit about public polling regarding the region, the partnership, and also some of the more contentious issues in the region?
Yes. So unfortunately, although I have the information, I do not have it with me right here. But there's some real differences we see in polling. In Greece, I'll talk about Greece. And one is the fact that for quite a long time, there was an undercurrent of anti-Americanism in Greece. Now, very recently, there was a poll asking which country has, I'm paraphrasing, has got our back. Number one was France. Number two, the United States of America. So there's a sea change of attitudes towards the United States. And I think it was a generational thing. Too much happened. The United States supported the dictatorship in 1970, that ended in 1974. There was the issue of Greece and Cyprus not being happy with how the United States handled the Turkish invasions. There were two, by the way, in 1974 of Cyprus. But that's 1974. Yeah, it was terrible. President Clinton apologized for this in Athens in November 1999. So there was a public apology. History moves on. That has to be acknowledged. It should not be sugar-coated. It should not be ignored. But now we are at a different juncture, historically speaking. There's also an improvement of relations with Israel. Let me, at this point, I did not get a question, but I'll since it's public attitudes, I'd like to say a few things about anti-Semitism in Greece. Again, I'm not sugarcoating anything. There are three things that I want to say. First is that there has been substantial progress in combating anti-Semitism and publicly acknowledging the Jewish presence in Greek history. So since at least 2010, every year has been a better year. Two, anti-Semitism does exist. It's not gone, and it cannot and will not vanish overnight, simply because we will it. So we have to be on the lookout. The third thing that I want to focus a little bit is that as terrible and awful as anti-Semitism in Greece is, it is more, and this doesn't make it right, an anti-Semitism of attitudes than actions. We've had, as I mentioned, more than 1 million Israeli tourists visit Greece. Not one instance of someone being beaten or killed because they were Jewish. It happens in France. It happens in other countries. It has not happened in Greece. So I'm not excusing anti-Semitism. I'm just stating facts, really.
I hope Dr. Andrew Viterbi will forgive me. He's been attending this lecture from San Diego.
Okay.
And I just received an email from him that if you allow me, I would like to read it.
With pleasure.
He's the namesake of our Viterbi School of Engineering, and of course a USC trustee. So this is what he says. Dear Max, Professor Tziampiris' speech was right on point. I only regretted his not mentioning Alexander the Great, approximately 300 BC, who was so much appreciated when he visited and liberated Judea, present Israel, that all inhabitants named their sons Alexander for 1 year. Coming to the present day, let me suggest that this event may inaugurate the formation of the Alexander Accords, based on the Abraham Accords. And Abraham, as we know, preceded Alexander by about 2 millennia, but he operated in a primitive agricultural society in contrast to the Hellenic cultural society of the Greek philosophers who educated Alexander. Adding Turkey to the threesome would indeed bring about a historical accord. Best always, Andy.
Well, that's great. That is great. So let me say my hometown was named after Alexander the Great's sister. It's her name. And so it's been around for more than 2,300 years. And obviously, I'm a Greek Macedonian, so I have anything that deals or has to do with Alexander the Great has a special resonance for me. So thank you very much for, I love it, the Alexander Accords. I mean, this is something we can work on the public diplomacy front. Even have some of the fellows think about it. I heard that.
Well, thank you very much.
Okay. And thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Tziampiris. Very helpful, informational, extremely valuable to understand all these shifting dynamics. And we look forward to more discussions and research in this area. As I said at the beginning, that the regional collaboration in these around the world, in these various places, certainly taking place under the shadow of the Great Power rivalry, are truly meaningful for us to better understand and also help us to also understand how the Great Power rivalry is going to unfold. So thank you all very much for joining us. Thanks to our online audience for joining us, and thanks to our partners. We look forward to working with you on our future programs. Thank you. Bye-bye.